For 2 decades, government and commercial organizations have relied on Maxar satellite imagery to map, monitor, and provide Earth intelligence at a global scale. Today, Maxar operates the world's most sophisticated commercial imaging constellation. But to help customers keep pace with rapid change around the world, we are excited to introduce Worldview Legion, our next-generation, high-resolution Earth imaging constellation. Designed and built in-house, Worldview Legion will fly in both sun-synchronous and mid-inclination orbits to dramatically increase Maxar's revisit over the most rapidly changing regions on Earth. It will triple our high-resolution 30-centimeter coverage and overall imaging capacity, allowing Maxar to capture many areas up to 15 times in a single day. This enables Maxar to better support applications that require current and accurate Earth intelligence, with frequent updates on changing ground conditions for enhanced monitoring, foundational in national security and military operations, accurate mapping, a key component on the road to autonomous vehicle technology, and expedited access to post-event coverage, critical in the wake of natural disasters. With Worldview Legion, Maxar is shaping the future of what's possible, changing the way we detect, understand, and address change. The next era in Earth intelligence begins at launch.
Good afternoon. Please welcome Robert Noonan, Lieutenant General, United States Army, retired. General Noonan is the chair of the AFCEA Intelligence Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Intelligence and National Security Summit. We have a full slate of programming today, including 2 plenaries, 2 breakout sessions, and a virtual happy hour. Don't miss virtual happy hour. As a reminder, we value your questions. In order to facilitate the moderators, we'd ask, using your chat function, that you submit your questions early. Now, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors and encourage all of you to please take time to visit some of the exhibits. And we could not do this program without their support. Thank you to all our sponsors. Our first session today is a conversation about military intelligence priorities with senior intelligence officers from all 6 of the intelligence service military services, including the newest service, the U.S. Space Force. It is now my pleasure to introduce Tony Frazier, Executive Vice President of Global Field Operations for Maxar, to introduce the moderator for this morning's plenary. Tony, over to you.
Hello, and many thanks to INSA, AFCEA, and all of our attendees for joining us virtually today. The Intelligence and National Security Summit is a premier forum for industry, government, and academia to come together to discuss our common challenges, share best practices, and look ahead to the future we can play in building a stronger and more resilient community. Maxar has been a proud sponsor of INSA and AFCEA for over a decade, and we're honored to be a repeat sponsor for this event. The uniformed and civilian personnel of the intelligence community are true unsung heroes. In particular, the men and women who are supporting our military with timely and actionable intelligence are taking on a unique set of challenges to maintain our edge globally against near-peer adversaries who are competing with us across air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace. I'm excited to hear the insights from this panel, and it's my privilege to introduce this session's moderator. Letitia, otherwise known as Tish Long, became the fifth chairman of the INSA Board of Directors in January 2016. She served as the director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency from October of 2010 to October 2014, becoming the first woman to lead a major U.S. intelligence agency. Ms. Long is a proud alumni of Virginia Tech, where she earned a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, and we're really excited to hear her comments today. Tish, over to you.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Tony, and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome back for day 2 of our summit. As you can see on the screen, we have a full lineup today. So let me quickly tell you who you will be hearing from. Brigadier General Jerry Carter, Director of Intelligence, U.S. Marine Corps. Brigadier General Leah Lauterbach, Director of Intelligence, U.S. Space Force, our newest military service. Major General Kate Leahy, Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff, G2, U.S. Army. Lieutenant General Mary O'Brien, Deputy Chief of Staff for ISR and Cyber Effects Operations, U.S. Air Force, and Rear Admiral Andrew Sugimoto, Assistant Commandant for Intelligence, U.S. Coast Guard, and Vice Admiral Jeff Trussler, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare and Director of Naval Intelligence, U.S. Navy. Now, with such a large panel and many issues to discuss, I may not pose each question to all 6 of you. Rather, I may direct my questions to a couple of you and then plan to move on to the next topic. But if anyone else wants to jump in, please feel free to do so. Now, that said, this first question is going to be for all of you. It's hard not to begin by considering the current pandemic and its effect on intelligence operations. What challenged you most during the pandemic? What investments are being made to be better positioned for the future? And what is one lesson learned that you will apply going forward? General Carter, Jerry, let's start with you.
So, ma'am, thank you very much. It's great to see you again, and I'm honored to share the stage with some very distinguished guests here today. But to the particular point about your question, which I certainly appreciate about the pandemic and how the workforce is doing, it is challenging, as you know. I work in the Pentagon on a day-to-day basis, and our daily profession being around classified material, and then having more than half of the workforce teleworking, it is a challenge to get all the operational things that are done. And then the other thing is, as many of you, we haven't seen many of our teammates since the pandemic has started. So the safety and security of the families, how everyone is doing, that's a part of the family readiness piece. So that's been a challenge. And how we're working around it is some of the technical tools, Microsoft 365 and Teams. And I would just leave you with the challenge of ensuring that we're not sharing classified information as we use some of these telecommunication tools is always something that's on my mind.
Yeah, of course. Good examples there, Jerry, so thanks. General Lauterbach.
Hi, ma'am. Thanks again very much for including the Sixth Service into the session today. We're very happy to be here. So I don't think my answers are going to be any different than many that you'll get, with the exception of perhaps the fact that in both the Space Force and on the U.S. Space Command side of the house, we were standing up these organizations at the time of the pandemic. So my previous position was at U.S. Space Command as the J2, and so that's where I experienced, a good 5 months of the pandemic. And I would say that in both cases, with the service and the command, you're already working at a 10% capacity of people that you need, right, to stand up the command or stand up the service. And so it just it exacerbates the issue when you've got folks teleworking. So that was a challenge, very much so for both of the cases. And I'd say that it's really stifled our build in both the service and in the command. But we got to move through it. I would say, though, a lesson that I would take out of all of this is that teleworking is a wonderful way to do some life-work balance. Never before had I been able to, walk around the golf course, for an hour. I can't do that from the Pentagon type of thing. So I really do think that we should take away from this that, one day of teleworking is probably something that we can all do, and that we all need to bring that and push that into our organization. So that's all I have, ma'am.
I dare say there's a whole lot of people cheering right now to hear you say that. I certainly am, because I'm with you. Teleworking is something that we have talked about for years. And in the intelligence community, we've always said, oh, too hard, can't do it. We have to be in the skiff. And I think we've learned just how much we actually can do at the unclassified level. So great lesson to learn to take forward. Okay, how about next up, Kate, General Leahy.
Good afternoon, ma'am. It's great to be part of this panel with my sister service counterparts. My answers aren't very different from the other services, I'm sure. The pandemic absolutely gave us an opportunity to up our game when it comes to telework. And as everyone has said, we don't have the opportunity to just hit pause when we're trying to access classified systems and provide the situational understanding that our commanders on the ground need in terms of what is going on the intelligence battlefield. So with that, I would say that the two things that we learned is that there are elements within our team that can very, very successfully work from home. And I think that we will post-pandemic continue to allow those folks to do that if it's working for them. And the second lesson really is that even post-pandemic, I know that a lot of these technologies are going to be part of just the routine way that we do business. And so we're going to need to build a way to put those into our battle rhythm, to do kind of a continuity of operations drills, because with this technology, it's kind of perishable, your ability to use it effectively. And so I think what we'll do is make sure that we continue to practice using it even when it's not necessary, just so that we're ready in the event of a contingency.
Yeah, very good point. And of course, we're good at that, exercising to be ready for real world operations. I don't think we were quite ready for this. That said, everyone pivoted very quickly. So well done there. All right, General O'Brien, Mary.
Thanks. It's great to be here and share some of the lessons that we've learned. And I would say that we're still learning with the pandemic. We did a couple things. In April, I sent out a remote worker check-in to all of my staff and heard from them what challenges with this new environment. We identified a couple themes. One, we've talked about the challenge of teleworking, to include, people sharing devices with their children who are now doing remote learning and remote school, incompatible devices. Are you a Mac family? Are you a Dell family? And as we rolled out these different capabilities, we started to hear a lot of, hey, this app is CAC enabled, this app isn't, things like that. And then we asked how we could help. In our case, it was taking our TDY budget and turning that into laptops, government-provided laptops, so that we could provide people that capability at home as we rolled out all these new, either Teams or Cisco or WebEx. I think I've been on every platform in the past 2 weeks. The other thing we identified were some of the resiliency challenges. Some of these, I think, existed pre-COVID, but they became exacerbated by the conditions. And so a big push for more telehealth, for mental health care, for tutor.com, things like that. So that survey was really good. It created a baseline for us to move forward. And then as far as once we got into the telework, the remote classified work, fortunately for the Air Force, we already had that requirement on the books as we've developed out the Agile Combat Employment concept. We knew that being able to do classified work while we're mobile was going to be an issue. So we already had some capabilities that this allowed us to accelerate the fielding. We're going to see us continue to do that post-COVID because it will still be a requirement for our Agile Combat Employment. So we'll be looking for more solutions with hardened security for that agility and mobility to do that remote classified work. And then I would echo that a lot of our naysayers have been convinced. In some of our meetings that we've done virtually since then, one of my kind of iron colonels said, I always thought telework meant I can't tell if you're working. He's like, I'm now a believer, and that we actually can do our mission with a partial telework remote workforce.
So I must say I've never heard that definition of telework before. I can't tell if you're working. I'm just really glad to see that everyone was able to pivot so quickly. And in fact, we all learned that we can in fact do this. So I'm going to come back to that remote classified point after we finish this first round. So Admiral Sugimoto, what did you learn?
See, that hit the bingo, right? Everybody understands now Microsoft Teams bingo that somebody wasn't going to hit the button in time. But first of all, it's an honor to be here among my very esteemed colleagues. It's great to see you guys, some of you again, and I look forward to meeting others. You know, I don't know about learning, but innovation was probably the single biggest thing that suddenly became very, very important. People is always going to be a priority. They are probably the greatest resource we have in the intelligence community. And as we move forward, it was not just about whether or not we were going to be able to get the work done. We had to, right? There are 275,000 cruise ship passengers out there that we had to get back home in the world, that we were able to still do that without raising the infection rates in the landing points, other things like that. The mission was going to get done. But then how do you balance the stress on the families of schools suddenly contracting and going virtual or not having it for a time period? How do you do that with the other demands of work and other things like that? As we were talking about, how do you get around or get to the point of getting access to classified material without bringing mass amounts of people together? And so everything from shift working to innovative schedules, cleaning opportunities set up to make sure that people felt comfortable and trusted the environment in which they could come in and still execute the mission. That had to be innovative. And as we move forward, it also changed the life at home changed, right? College students came back home, elderly parents had to be taken care of, or some other method of visitation had to be set up so they weren't alone. And all of these things drove some method of new ways of doing things that they hadn't yet considered or we hadn't considered. And that was sort of the key part. And it just goes to the fact that that's one of, I think, America's greatest traits. And I'm reminded of that a movie, Apollo 13, where the guy shows up with a cardboard box of parts and says, this is how we're going to get our people back. Somehow we had to get the mission going and get it done, and that's what we did. So thanks for the opportunity to speak.
And I think there are many millions of Americans who say thank you to the United States Coast Guard, as you said, with the cruise ships that were out there and just getting all of those passengers back safely. So thanks for that. You also, Andrew, raised a couple of good points that your colleagues have raised, just how, with teleworking, pardon me, our personal and professional lives are blended more than ever before, as we're juggling whether we have small kids at home or parents at home or can't see our grandchildren the way we're used to seeing them. So it presents challenges for us all. And I think as leaders requires us to perhaps be even more flexible than in the past. So last but not least, Admiral Trussler. Jeff.
Good afternoon, Ms. Long. Great to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you as well.
Hey, well, you make it easy with everybody else going first. I'll just say ditto to all of that, and we experienced all the same challenges. So I'll just take a different tack and be a little bit of a downer on some of this telework stuff. So both Scott Bray and I took over during this, and so we don't know what's normal yet in our new positions, and we're experiencing that. So a couple of things, we probably all thought as kids, or adults going through the information technology age, we probably thought we would be to a place where we could do this pretty easily a lot sooner than we were now. So the good news, and half full out of all of this, is that it happened. It forced us to do this. And when I talk to some buddies in industry or even other government agencies, they're, my agency already had me, we were required to telework 2 days a week every pay period so that we could account for snow days. This was nothing for us. So we had to do a large transition. It helped us recognize how far maybe behind we are. On the downside, I think it was pretty easy to transition, once everybody adjusted to the technology, for people who already worked together, who were a good team, who knew their teammates, their bosses, their subordinates, and just like in classes in schools. And I bet folks with children are experiencing that right now. Shift the classroom to home. You knew who your teachers were. You knew who your classmates were. Now, as they're going back, and they're getting a new teacher, and if they're doing that virtually, that's probably challenging. As attrition happens, you hire people transfer. I think that'll be harder to hold the teamwork aspect together. So that's just what comes as part of leadership, a leadership opportunity to how can we take advantages of all the goodness that we've had here, and some of the challenges that in reality are going to exist. I'm also a little worried about the explosion of opportunities. It's going to create some actual cyber vulnerabilities for us, because we know there's plenty of articles out there that say, they even just talk about DoD and how we're operating and how we're shifting the different platforms we're using and we're trying. And that's just if you're an adversary, that's just target number one. Now I'm fishing around. So not only fishing around in our to our vulnerabilities potentially to our work environment, but now to our home environment, because we're so many out there. So that's going to require, again, leadership, training, vigilance on our part, as well as even if we're doing government furnished equipment or bring your own device type efforts in the home. We're going to have to tweak up everybody's mindset and vigilance about how they maintain some of that. Vice it become things we really didn't have the opportunity with, but now physical security problems of vulnerabilities of getting in through our networks and data and access to the DoD. So great opportunity. I'm glad we can do stuff like this, and I don't have to go through some VTC scheduler to get a line to dial into, and we can set these things up on our own. But a lot of leadership challenges for us to watch for in the future. Over.
Yeah, it certainly does, Jeff. I mean, the threat vector is much larger now. And, with that, let's segue into some discussions there. I want to follow on to something that General O'Brien talked about, because both the Army and the Air Force have been piloting technologies that allow remote classified work. So let's start with the Air Force, since we heard a little bit from Mary. Kate, so how's the pilot working, and how is this going to affect your operations going forward?
So on our case, I would say that the pilot that was already in the works under our Advanced Battle Management System, the ABMS, that Preston Dunlop has been working, he already had some platforms that were ready to go. And he sent a lot of them out to Pacific Air Forces for them to work through, and then some for the headquarters staff. Everything I'm hearing from what's happening in PACAF has been working very well. What was interesting when General Brown came to be our chief, and we talked to him about what we were doing in 826, and that there's a waiting list for these these tablets. And he said, well, we had them at PACAF. And I said, well, yeah, we sent them out to the warfighters. And so not as many people here on your staff have them. So they're working well enough that there's a demand signal for more of them. And we'll find different ways and different times of the year. Perhaps when we're building the POM, our programming people need to have them. Perhaps when we're doing the futures game, our planners and war gamers need to have them. So the biggest thing will be to scale. How do we scale up to what we're looking for? And we're going to be looking to industry to help us do that. The cross-domain solutions across all the different classification levels, standardizing that and connecting more. So I say it's working well. It's tying in very well with the joint warfighting construct of the future, which being mobile is going to be an imperative. We are not planning to be in our hardened air operations centers in the future 21st century warfare.
Interesting. Okay. Kate, what about from the Army perspective?
So it sounds like the Air Force had a more institutionalized pilot than we did in the Army. We really saw the pandemic as kind of a target of opportunity to get comfortable with some of this new technology. So just one example is NSA's Commercial Solutions for Classified program. And what we were able to do was we were able to put those systems in the hands of both our counterintelligence and our human collectors. So they're people that are typically out and about, TDY, outside of their homes, not coming into the Pentagon in order to do their reporting. And we found that NSA program was extremely effective on both the CI, counterintelligence, as well as the human platforms. Additionally, we were able to put classified laptops as well as classified telephones in the hand of select senior leaders. That also was very effective. And then lastly, I have to mention the fact that on the unclassified side, Microsoft CVR, the commercial virtual remote environment, has just been an absolute lifesaver in terms of our ability to connect the portions of our workforce that were operating from home with the portions of the workforce that were able and required to come into the Pentagon. And I know that across the DoD, we've all used CVR extensively, and that the department is looking at how do we come up with a long-term solution, because we absolutely see this as a capability post-pandemic that we're all going to continue to rely on.
Well, it's certainly something that I've been talking about throughout the pandemic. I think I do think we've got to figure out how to work classified operations, working with classified information remotely. So kudos to both the Army and the Air Force. Would any of the other 4 services like to give an indication on how you're thinking about this? Any pilots in the offing or planning even?
Ma'am, from the Space Force perspective, I'd say no, we haven't given much thought to it. But the great thing here is that we are still under the Department of the Air Force, and so still very good partners with General O'Brien and her team. So it won't be very difficult, I think, for us to steal everything that the Air Force is doing and make it our own. So.
And you kind of have your hands full right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I
Okay.
like Leia's approach as well from the Marine Corps, and that is piggybacking off of the success of the other services is a good, sound approach. I think the Marine Corps would be happy to follow.
And I think there's probably some lessons learned that both services will obviously share. So
glad they're breaking ground for us.
There you go. So let's talk about this newest part of the armed services. So, and Leia, that first question, as Jeff alluded to, probably not real fair for a couple of you since you are brand new in the jobs. But can you talk a little bit about where you are in the stand-up? Where are you in defining your intelligence requirements? What capabilities do you need to develop? How can industry help you? Let's delve into this a little bit.
Sure. Yes, ma'am. So I think there's one, we have to understand that we have a combatant command that is now dedicated to warfighting in the space domain, U.S. Space Command, and they stood up 29 August of 2019, and so that was where I just came from about 6 weeks ago, and now we're standing up the Space Force. The Space Force will have its first birthday. I want to say it's on the 20th of December, but please don't quote me on that. But it is in December at some point. So, and then on top of that, those two different, very different, right, service versus a combatant command. But on top of that is that we always had in the Air Force this major command, and that was Air Force Space Command, that had, right, that's how we ran space operations. We had intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance within there. We had cyber, et cetera. So much of that which is already presented to U.S. Space Command to fight in the domain, that's already in existence, and it continues to go. We have missions every single day that we're doing to support operations. around the world, or our own operations that are on orbit to support the combatant commander of U.S. Space Command. So it's not like we had to stand all of that up. What we're doing right now is standing up, I'll say first, is the staff here at the Pentagon. So that will be called the U.S. Space Force Headquarters, just like any of the other services. My duty title is the Director of Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance, and I'm the S2. We have where we're going to use a little bit of different language to term out the directors and whatnot, but the bottom line is that the functions are very much the same from the other services. We just need to be able to do it lighter and leaner because we have been directed that we will have no growth in the Space Force, and so we have to do things differently. And so you've heard General Raymond probably say, "Be bold and clean sheet of paper approach. How do we make this happen?" And so from when we're standing up the Space Force S2 Directorate here at the Pentagon, I right now, I mean, honestly, I have about 15 people, and I'm the 15th person on the staff. And my exec is the 14th person, so we are at the beginnings. We have finally some billets that will come on funded here on the 1st of October. So we'll hire quite a few more folks, but it won't be much larger than double that for the first year. And then maybe, we'll see how we get to it the year or two after that. But let me say that, so intelligence requirements that are out there, U.S. Space Command has intelligence requirements for warfighting. The old AFCEA, Air Force Space Command, now soon to be called the Space Operations Command. That's one of our field commands within the Space Force. They already have those intelligence requirements that are in existence. So we'll refine those as we go along. But I would tell you that one of my daunting challenges, I think, or responsibilities in building the space intelligence enterprise is what is it of those requirements that we have, what's not being answered today, and then how do we want to be able to answer those questions? Having come from U.S. Space Command, I can tell you that it's no different from any other domain. You have that you want to understand the intent of the adversary or other nations out there, and you want to understand the capabilities, those that are on orbit and those that are on the ground terrestrially. So no different there. It's very difficult, though, because of the distance of space and the just the domain itself on orbit to actually get the fidelity that you need from various sensors that we have. So that you can make confidence calls on what it is that we're looking at. What are we seeing from an adversary perspective, whether that's intent or what kind of satellite is that, and what are the capabilities on it? So I would tell you as an example, General Raymond, he actually called out the Russians a couple of times this year because of on-orbit activity, which we thought was unprofessional behavior. By the Russians with what appears to be an anti-satellite capability, and but it took us a long time to get to the analysis. That was the issue, is that it's not instantaneous. You don't know right away what it is that you're seeing, and then you really have a very low confidence in your assessments because we just don't have the types of capabilities that I think that we're going to need. And so one of those things would be what Title 10 assets do we need on orbit, perhaps, to do more reconnaissance so that we can get to the intelligence that we're looking for. That's just one. I could go on for an entire hour.
I am sure you could. You actually anticipated all of my follow-on questions. So I would say you're off to a great start. So thanks very much.
Thanks, ma'am.
Okay, let's take a question from the audience, and this will be jump ball. So this is really out there for everyone. Our adversaries are advancing their weapons faster. Where do you see the demand on your services intelligence centers for S&T intelligence over the next 5 to 10 years? And this comes from Preston Wallach. So who would like to take that first?
Sure. I will, and I think this is a shared, really a shared question with the Space Force as well. So as General Lauterbach talked about all the changes in the demands for intelligence to support analysis, I think we're going to see the National Air and Space Intel Center, a lot of that demand signal will increase. At the same time, we're seeing an increased demand for analysis in the air domain of new developing capabilities, whether it's hypersonics or whether it's cyber activity or things like that. The Air Force has several very important acquisition programs. The demand for that foundational science and technical intelligence to make sure that we're going in the right direction with those acquisition programs is going to put more pressure on our NASIC analysts to do multiple things. None of our adversaries have taken a pause on developing new capabilities. So it's going to be really imperative that we continue to collect and then inform our own acquisition programs, as well as changes to operational warfighting that might be required.
Jerry.
Yes, ma'am. If I could build off of the General's comments, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, so we absolutely know, Admiral Trussler highlighted, that we're dealing with a very complex and sophisticated adversary. So for us in the Marine Corps, certainly down at MCIA, the Marine Corps Intelligence Activity, we have to do business differently. And so it's threat-informed capability development, intel support to acquisition, and that is all the way through the acquisition process. And that process is very long, as we know. It's very complicated, too slow, the way technology moves. But intel has to be a part of that acquisition process the entire way. We know that adversaries are very interested in the intellectual property and the things that we are doing. And so we have to be very careful about how we do business in the future. And I think there's a great responsibility the service intel centers have to bring to the fight. Over.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Tish.
Go ahead.
We all jumped in at once. Everybody's excited. I'll throw in from in a service perspective, from a Navy perspective. Obviously, in space and cyber, just tons of challenges for all of us. A unique challenge in the Navy, and we call ourselves America's away team. That when you look kind of half full at how the world operates, when you look at probably our big four that we have to worry about, and when they go, sometimes when their citizens have to go to the beach, they have to look up and down the hall. Look at that, and there's one of the coastal defense cruise missile sites that our nation has. And can you imagine living in a country where they're ringed with cruise missile sites on their shores because they're worried about the United States Navy or other adversaries? But those become real challenges or threats, and they're pouring a lot of money and investment in those, and we have to watch for it. And when we go to the beach here in the United States, as a seagoing nation, we're protected on both sides. So that's just an interesting and unique challenge that we have to watch for, because as we operate around the globe and defend the security and free and open commerce on the global commons, that's a threat that they pose to us, and our understanding of their capabilities and not getting caught by surprise when they could be a real threat to us. That's a challenge, a constant challenge for us that we have to watch for. Over.
Yeah, so it's really understanding, their intent, and then really trying to understand the detailed capabilities so that we can develop those countermeasures or tactics, techniques, procedure, the doctrine to overcome. Okay, let's move on. That's on one side of things from the S&T perspective. Late last year, Secretary Esper directed the creation of a new joint warfighting concept for all domain operations. And that was the integration and exercise of command and control over all domains in a conflict. So not just air, land, and sea, but also space, cyber, transportation, missile defense, really bringing it all together. And in bringing it all together, it requires near instantaneous sharing of information among all of your forces in the fight. So how are your services posturing the intelligence capabilities to support these all-domain operations? Are you making changes? Do you have plans to make changes? What do you foresee over the next 12 to 18 months? And I'll just make that another jump ball because you're all working on this. And maybe I say another jump ball. Let's throw it out there. Kate, how about you? I didn't give you a chance on the last go round.
Yes, ma'am. So in the Army, we put what you just discussed under the umbrella of multi-domain operations. And on the intel side, it's multi-domain intelligence in support of MDO. And so, you did a great job describing it in terms of how we come together, all the services, and how do we leverage from space to the aerial to the terrestrial to the foundation layer in order to synthesize and fuse all of that information together in order to paint the picture for our commanders. And so we're doing a lot of what we call a campaign of learning in the Army in terms of new systems, that a universal ground system where we're going to be able to combine EW, cyber, and a SIGINT capability together. We're going to have a ground system that's kind of the catcher's mitt, and it's going to be really agnostic of is the sensor data coming from space? Is it coming from national technical means? Is it coming from commercial satellites? Is it coming from some of our air breathers? And it's all going to come into one place. And as we're working, by, with, and through Army Futures Command, we're ensuring that we're building in machine learning and artificial intelligence into that so that we can really reduce the kill chain time and more rapidly give the analysts the tools that they need in order to really get that sensor to shooter time down. And in that way, we can really dominate the enemy moving forward. And so it is a team sport like we've never seen before. And the thing that has been wonderful to see is how industry has been so willing to partner with us on this campaign of learning. And so we're doing small tests, we're evaluating data before we make big programmatic decisions. And what that's going to do is it's going to come up with a better system that's more effective. It's going to save the taxpayer a lot of money, and it's also going to end up with a lot more lethality to bring to bear against our adversaries.
Yeah. Well said. Leah, what does success look like from the Space Force? I mean, we just heard space referenced to multiple times. What does success look like from the space perspective?
Well, I would say, ma'am, it is the ingesting of massive amounts of data that today we are just unable to track of what is on orbit, as an example, and then being able to share that data with all of the other services, and that would just it just brings everybody's domain awareness up. And so I think that I see that Zach Crippen has put in a question there about the first native digital service. So General Raymond has absolutely stated that he wants each of us as whatever it is that we're going to be called. We're not too sure what we're going to be called yet, but I'll say, so our space professionals all have some sort of a certification or an understanding of what this means for us, if it's AI, ML, or cloud computing, whatever. And so I think that we've got a great opportunity here to really build this digital service right from the ground up, so success then is defined as being able to provide that space domain awareness, not only to ourselves, but or the combatant commanders, but to each of the services that are here today.
Okay, excellent. So let's do a pivot here. Let's talk about the Arctic. Admiral Sugimoto, with global warming, navigation of the Arctic is going to be increasingly critical to both security and our global trade. What are our adversaries' Arctic ambitions, and how well positioned do you think the United States is to counter them while advancing our own? Because we certainly have ambitions for the Arctic as well. Yeah, you got to hit that button again.
He looks frozen. I'm ready to jump in.
I know. Andrew? Okay, go ahead, Jeff. We'll hear from the Navy and then hopefully back to the Coast Guard.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a good partnership up there. And as you may be aware, as a submariner, I've spent a lot of time in the Arctic, underneath it, and up at the ice camps for test and development, a couple of 100 miles north of Alaska a few times. And so I've been fascinated by the Arctic personally, and as a service, we operate up there. And as we all know, no matter what anybody says about why climate change is happening, it's happening a bit, and the ice is receding, and that's opening up opportunities potentially for transit. It has not happened overnight, as everybody thought was going to happen, but there have been some demonstrations by commercial transportation to use that route. It is still a pretty treacherous area up there, and some companies and ships will go up there at their own risk. But that provides an opportunity of cooperation either among the services or among other like-minded countries for search and rescue, environmental research, and so forth. The adversaries, obviously, Russia's got an enormous coastline up there, probably the equivalent in mileage of coastline than all the rest of us Arctic countries combined. And they see that as an opportunity of where they can establish some dominance and try to insert themselves as leaders and maybe even try to restrict others' access. They're certainly investing some time in their northern, time and money in their northern bases. And we've even seen the Chinese express interest. They state it publicly. They've had excursions up there, in the name of research. But we also know that they don't like to play by and interpret international laws and norms like the rest of us. So we all have to watch that very closely, because that is a global commons that is going to be more and more common in the future. We're going to have to pay hard attention to, and we're not going to be able to neglect it at the expense of other things. It's not a wholehearted jump in, but we do have to keep an eye on it. We do have to invest a little in it, and we do have to learn to operate up there. Over.
We do indeed. I don't see that we have Jerry back. Okay. Let's I'm sorry, we don't have Andrew back. Jerry, did you have something you wanted to add? Not on the Arctic. Okay. Let's do another jump ball. So this one is on personnel and diversity. So we've been working through this pandemic. At the same time, developments throughout the country this summer have led every organization, inside government and out, to assess how well, as an organization, they promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Promoting diversity is critically important. It's an important topic for all of us. I will tell you, it's one that INSA has been very focused on. And so I would like to hear from all of you on this. How are you creating diverse and inclusive teams that contribute a range of perspectives? I mean, that's what intelligence is all about, gathering all of the various perspectives and making those assessments. And so how are you doing that to inform your services intelligence capabilities? And what are you doing to ensure that all of your team members are valued and that they have equal opportunities to succeed? And I'll just throw that out there. In fact, Andrew, welcome back. We didn't get your response there on the Arctic. Do you want to start on this one?
Sure. I apologize for that technical difficulties there.
No worries.
People are the single biggest and best asset that we have in intelligence. It's what's between the ears that truly makes the difference. if you don't value those individuals for who they are and the different backgrounds and experiences that they bring to it, you are diminishing your capacity to truly understand the adversary, to be innovative, to jump ahead, and to really truly make those differentials. As a service, as well as the intel community here in the U.S. Coast Guard, we have absolutely stepped out on a new diversity and inclusion plan. And inside just Coast Guard intelligence alone, we have adopted ODNI's small steps plan so that each individual starts on a journey of what that looks like. And then we're combining it as a whole in group efforts, as well as listening sessions to truly get after the problem, understand what are causing frustrations, allay fears of some individuals that they may not be recognized, and to truly get after the fact that we really do value each and every one for the contributions they make to the safety of our nation each and every day. Thank you.
Well said, Andrew. Thank you. Jerry.
Yeah, thanks, and I mean, I'm obviously a big fan of diversity and inclusion, something that is near and dear to my heart as well. From my personal opinion, anytime that you can have a very diverse and inclusive workforce, I think you build better teams. We've seen that throughout our career. I certainly have seen that throughout my professional career. And from a service perspective, we really know that we don't have it all right. So the Commandant has recognized some of our shortcomings and challenges. We are addressing them. And so at this time of year, we get the general officers together, once or twice a year, and we're doing it virtually as well. And we just had a session last night, was pretty powerful. And the Commandant really underscored some areas that we need to work on and really challenge all the general officers to up our game. And then from the DIRT perspective, I mean, very difficult for us to measure that. But as Andy pointed out, I mean, we have to put some things in place where we encourage that diversity and inclusion. And then how do we recognize those people and ensure that we have diversity in thought, diversity and inclusion in the way we view the world, and across the joint service too, as we fight as a joint service. So I think that's always a very strong and powerful theme. Over.
It's how we're going to provide the best intelligence. So, Mary, you looked like you were leaning in there.
Sure. So we view diversity as a national security imperative, not just in the intelligence and cyber functional areas, but across all of the Air Force mission areas. And so our new Chief of Staff, General Brown, is very clear on this issue. He released his Accelerate, Change, or Lose white paper, and under the Empowered Airmen Can Solve Any Problem, he specifically says we need to fill our ranks with airmen of diverse backgrounds to maintain relevance and currency with our peer competitors, especially as we embrace a digital age. And so we're addressing these barriers. While we do that, we're leveraging the existing diversity that we have in our ISR and cyber teams to think through the capability developments and our future needs. And so for me personally, at my level, I'm fortunate to participate on our Air Force level barrier analysis working group. So this is a organization that's charged to identify policy as well as informal or formal practices that, whether related to gender, ethnic background, disability status, to identify these barriers to advancement and share them with the Diversity Task Force. And now the intent is to accelerate those fixes. And so we've talked about increasing the scholarships for the historically Black colleges, the Hispanic serving institutions. We've just recently set some targets for diversity in our sessions, and we're talking about unconscious bias training as well. I found that unconscious bias awareness training is insufficient. Instead, I've implemented a series of bias interrupter tools inside our A26 workforce and shared with the broader ISR enterprise to include a session I had with some of the HIPSE staffers to talk about diversity in our service. And so that addresses hiring practices, performance reports, assignments, who's getting your glamour work, and who's doing your housework. And then conducting my meetings in a way that we hear all voices. And so I think there's a lot that we can do. There's a lot we can learn from organizations that have already done some of this work and created the diverse and inclusive cultures inside their own organizations. And we can adopt a lot of those best practices inside the Air Force and the wider DoD or IC.
Not sure I've heard it referred to before as glamour work and housework, but you're absolutely right. I mean, who is being given opportunities and where others are not? I mean, really understanding those barriers, I think, is the first thing that we all need to do before, we can put in place practices to enable folks to overcome them. So, well said there. Leah, anything that you would like to add? Anything from your perspective? You're muted.
And there's a bit of delay. That's latency on the part of the computer. I'm certain it's not operator error. Anyhow, I was just stating that. So likewise, when General Brown has come in as the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Raymond is now the Chief of the Space Operations. Same type of language that he is using. And I would just say, as not really a vignette, but as an example, is that as we went through and selected our AFSCs, our specialty codes, and that would be Intel and Cyber and our acquisition and engineering folks, both on the officer and the enlisted side. We held boards over this past summer. Those lists have not come out yet, so folks don't know if they've been selected or not. But we did absolutely make a conscious effort, and diversity was part of the criteria for whether or not you were on the select list. So, of course, people's performance, their records, that's number one. But we absolutely had a conscious effort to make diverse teams. So that is really from the very beginning. I'm very proud of that.
And it has to be a conscious effort.
Yes.
So kudos, well done there. Jeff.
No, thank you. It's unfortunate that it sometimes takes a challenging event or a series of challenging events to get us to wake up and look at something differently. And when you look at back at the history, of race relations in our country, and we've had several large events, and then you think, somebody like me might look up and say, well, gosh, we've got all that solved. Didn't we fix all that? We put a law in place or something. But then the most important thing that this summer has helped me do is just listen. Whether some very junior sailors and members, active duty and civilian of my organization, and just flat out neighbors. And when you stop and sincerely ask, some questions, you realize, wow, there are some biases and downright racist activities that sometimes still happen. I'm shocked of the stories from my neighbors. One or two of of my younger sailors, senior sailors. We've even seen some articles from senior leaders in the intelligence community, former that just talked about what they had to go through and put up with to get there. So all of these efforts, I think we're putting, we're all open, eyes wide open, looking at it with different lenses. Because it still exists, whether we realize it or not. And I come from a submarine community, all male, for 25 years. My operational and shore assignments were, frankly, all male. And it wasn't until I showed up at a DC, a decade ago that, men and women on staffs. Wow, how about that? And and then in Washington, DC, probably one of the most diverse places on earth. I have had to learn and grow over the last decade and didn't realize how little I had been exposed to a wide variety of opinions, backgrounds, and what that brings. So I think we're all learning here, and we got to make sure we encourage and develop that among our people.
We do indeed. And Kate, I apologize. You have about 15 seconds before I have to wrap this up.
I got it. I'll be brief. So in July, our Secretary of the Army and Chief of Staff of the Army launched Project Inclusion, and it really begins with a series of very deliberate listening sessions where leaders are listening to our people and hearing their stories and getting a better understanding of what they have experienced in the military, in our Army. And we think that's the best way to get after it, by listening to each other. And the best guidance I heard someone say is, as you're participating in these, seek first to not offend anyone, and on the receiving end, seek hard not to be offended. We've got to be honest in order to make the improvements that we all recognize are so necessary.
Well, I think that's very good advice. Seek not to offend and seek not to be offended. But the one thing in common that you all said there was listening. And it really does start with listening and trying to understand each other's perspectives. I've had immense pleasure listening to all of you today. I had a ton more questions, and the audience had a ton more questions as well. I know we could have gone on another hour, but our time is up here. Thank you all so very much, and thanks to our audience for tuning in. Everybody have a great rest of the day.
Tish, and thank you to all the panelists for an outstanding discussion. Let's now take a 30-minute break, and please take this opportunity to visit the kiosks in our virtual exhibit hall. Breakout sessions on U.S.-China relations after the pandemic and on CIO perspectives will begin promptly at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.